90 Iranian naval vessels reduced to scrap in 14 days. 2,200 U.S. Marines are now 50 nautical miles from the Strait of Hormuz, locking their sights on Kharg Island. This is the raw intelligence from the Pentagon this morning. Welcome to the grim reality of March 16, 2026. Operation Roaring Lion and Epic Fury have officially bypassed the traditional doctrines of modern warfare. The United States and Israel are no longer just bombing radar sites or engaging in endless infantry firefights. They are executing a synchronized, multi-dimensional asphyxiation of the Islamic Republic and its proxies. Forget the static frontline maps you saw on the news yesterday. The real war is currently being fought on three invisible battlefields: the global oil arteries in the Persian Gulf, the cheap drone logistics pipelines in southern Lebanon, and the terrified rioting streets of Tehran. Right now, a heavily armed U.S. Marine Expeditionary Unit is floating just outside the critical choke point of the Middle East. Real-time commercial satellite imagery from early this morning confirms that IRGC fast attack craft are desperately scattering into hidden coastal coves to avoid preemptive airstrikes. Why? Because Washington just dropped a psychological nuclear bomb by obliterating 90 military targets on Kharg Island, but deliberately leaving the massive oil export terminals completely untouched. The United States has placed a cold steel blade directly against the financial jugular of the regime. They are holding 90% of Iran's national oil revenue hostage. This is not a conventional military invasion aiming to occupy enemy land. This is a highly weaponized economic stranglehold designed to force a heavily armed regime to collapse under its own catastrophic weight. We have extracted the classified operational data, stripped away the mainstream media noise, and reverse-engineered the joint combat strategy of Washington and Jerusalem. In this exclusive intelligence briefing, we will dissect the three deadly prongs of this strategic trident: the Kharg Island financial trap, the Litani River logistical meat grinder, and the deliberate, calculated destruction of the Basij internal security shield. Prepare for a deep dive into the ruthless architecture of modern, systemic warfare. Let us shift our operational lens to the Persian Gulf. The first prong of this trident is not a military occupation. It is a meticulously engineered financial hostage situation centered entirely on Kharg Island. Just days ago, United States Central Command orchestrated what is being described as one of the most devastating bombing raids in the history of the Middle East. But the true tactical genius of this strike lies in what the U.S. Air Force chose not to blow up. Over 90 military targets were systematically vaporized. Yet the sprawling oil infrastructure, the very facilities that export 90% of the Islamic Republic's crude oil, remains completely intact. This is the ultimate Pentagon trap. By sparing the economic lifeline, Washington is playing a terrifying psychological game with the high command in Tehran. They have effectively positioned a 2,200-strong U.S. Marine Expeditionary Unit, currently loitering just 50 nautical miles from the Strait of Hormuz, as the executioner holding the axe. If the regime attempts to close the strait or harass commercial shipping to leverage global oil prices, those Marines and the accompanying naval strike group will sever the island's export capabilities permanently. It is a brutal ultimatum. Keep the oil flowing to the global market, or starve your own military war machine overnight. Real-time open-source intelligence from the morning of March 16, 2026, reveals the sheer operational panic this has caused within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC. Satellite feeds show their notorious swarms of fast attack craft frantically scattering from main naval bases into small, unmapped coastal coves. They are terrified of a preemptive American strike that would send the rest of their fleet to the bottom of the ocean. However, hiding these vessels actively neutralizes their only asymmetrical maritime advantage. The IRGC Navy is essentially paralyzed, forced to choose between preserving their remaining boats or attempting a suicidal blockade of Hormuz that would immediately trigger the total destruction of Kharg Island. The American strategy here is flawless and ruthless. They have weaponized the enemy's own economic desperation. Without the billions of dollars flowing out of that specific island terminal, The regime cannot pay its internal security forces, let alone fund its proxy militias across the region. This is not a battle for territory. It is a calculated financial siege designed to bleed the regime dry from the inside out. And as the money stops flowing, the shockwaves are already violently crashing into the northern border of Israel. As the financial arteries are clamped in the Persian Gulf, the catastrophic chain reaction is actively detonating along Israel's northern border. This brings us to the second prong of our tactical analysis: the Litani River logistical meat grinder. For over a year, the Israeli Defense Forces, or the IDF, successfully degraded Hezbollah's massive arsenal, reducing it from an estimated 150,000 projectiles down to roughly 30,000 or 40,000 rockets. By traditional military metrics, destroying over 75% of an enemy's stockpile is a monumental victory. But in the asymmetrical reality of March 16, 2026, it has triggered a terrifying tactical mutation, cut off from the unlimited financial intravenous drip that used to flow freely from Tehran. Hezbollah is rapidly adapting to a brutal war of economic attrition. They are no longer heavily relying on massive, expensive ballistic missile barrages that attempt to overwhelm air defenses through sheer brute force. Instead, leaked intelligence reports from last night indicate that Hezbollah's secretive Unit 127 has shifted entirely to launching localized, cheap UAV swarms. They are manufacturing low-grade, explosive suicide drones that cost roughly $2,000 apiece to assemble. When these slow-moving plastic weapons cross into Israeli airspace, they force the IDF to fire Tamir interceptor missiles from the Iron Dome system. Every single Tamir missile costs at least $50,000. This is a mathematical nightmare for Jerusalem. Hezbollah is literally bleeding the Israeli defense budget dry by forcing them to use diamond-tipped bullets to shoot down cheap plastic toys. Simultaneously, the physical battlefield is being violently reshaped. Over the weekend, Israeli airstrikes completely obliterated a highly strategic bridge crossing the Litani River, effectively severing northern Lebanon from the south. The IDF is actively mobilizing the 7th Armored Brigade near this ruined bridge, signaling preparations for the largest ground invasion into Lebanese territory since 2006. Their goal is to physically carve out a massive dead zone south of the Litani to protect Israeli border towns. However, deep tactical analysis suggests that this ground invasion might be the exact trap Hezbollah is patiently waiting for. By retreating and hiding among the rubble, Hezbollah operatives are preparing to drag Israeli Merkava tanks into a heavily mined, close-quarters guerrilla war. The situation is further destabilized by the total capitulation of the Lebanese state. Despite an official cabinet order to disarm the terror group, the Lebanese Armed Forces, or the LAF, are openly defying Beirut. They are actively releasing captured Hezbollah gunmen at military checkpoints for a laughable bail of just $20 American. The diplomatic off-ramp has completely collapsed. The IDF is now staring down the barrel of a multi-billion-dollar ground campaign, stepping directly into an economic and logistical quagmire where winning the territory might ultimately bankrupt the occupation force. Now, we pivot the tactical lens directly into the dark heart of the Iranian capital. The third, and perhaps most insidious prong of the Allied strategy, is the deliberate, calculated shattering of the internal security shield. For weeks, military analysts assumed the Israeli Air Force and the United States Central Command would exclusively target nuclear enrichment sites or heavy ballistic missile silos. However, the raw battlefield intelligence paints a drastically different, almost surgical picture. A massive wave of precision airstrikes has explicitly leveled the regional headquarters and vital command centers of the besieged paramilitary forces across Tehran. Just hours ago, on March 16, 2026, confirmed open-source intelligence indicated that the Ammar Yasser base, a critical node for suppressing domestic dissent, was completely obliterated from the map. Why are F-35 stealth fighter jets dropping heavy precision munitions on riot police headquarters? Because Jerusalem and Washington are not just trying to degrade a military, They are actively trying to detonate a civilian uprising from the inside out by systematically vaporizing the very enforcers who brutalize the Iranian public. The Allied air forces are forcibly removing the physical barrier that prevents a revolution, and this psychological warfare is working with terrifying speed. Following the destruction of these besieged complexes, violent flash riots have immediately erupted in the traditional bazaars and the dense suburban districts of Tehran. To make matters worse for the regime, the supreme leader has entirely vanished from public view, fueling rampant rumors of his death or severe incapacitation. Simultaneously, the targeted assassination of two senior intelligence commanders in the central city of Isfahan has plunged the regime's internal command structure into absolute chaos. This rapid internal collapse has triggered a fatal paradox for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The IRGC is now trapped in an impossible dilemma. With the Basij suppression forces decimated and the streets burning with civilian anger, the elite guard is being forced to recall their highly trained air defense operators and radar technicians from the missile batteries to protect underground command bunkers from their own furious citizens. By pulling these crucial operators away from the air defense networks, the IRGC is inadvertently tearing massive blind spots into the radar canopy over the capital city. They are literally abandoning their surface-to-air missile consoles to fight a civil war in the streets. The Allied forces have realized a terrifying truth. They do not need to hunt down every single missile launcher. They just need to ensure that nobody is left sitting at the radar screens to pull the trigger. We have reached the decisive verdict of this military intelligence briefing. When you connect the data points from the Persian Gulf, the Lebanese border, and the Iranian capital, a terrifyingly clear picture emerges. The Allied forces of the United States and Israel have completely rewritten the doctrine of modern warfare. They have realized that, in the 21st century, you do not need to physically occupy an enemy nation with millions of troops to utterly destroy it. You simply need to surgically dismantle its life support systems. By holding the 90% oil revenue hostage at Kharg Island, bleeding the Hezbollah logistics network dry at the Litani River, and vaporizing the Basij internal security shield in Tehran, Washington and Jerusalem have engineered a perfect storm of systemic collapse. Looking forward to the next 72 hours, the battlefield trajectory is irreversible. The financial tourniquet currently being applied by the U.S. Marines will accelerate hyperinflation within the Islamic Republic to unprecedented, catastrophic levels. The IRGC will find it mathematically impossible to meet the payroll for their sprawling network of proxy militias across the Middle East. As this central funding evaporates, Hezbollah will be forced to strictly ration even their cheapest drone components and unguided rockets. This logistical starvation will drastically reduce their operational tempo, just as the IDF armored columns push deeper into the southern Lebanese dead zone. Hezbollah will be fighting a brutal, multi-front war with entirely empty pockets and rapidly depleting ammunition reserves. Simultaneously, the localized flash riots currently burning through the Tehran bazaars will inevitably metastasize into a nationwide, uncontrollable revolution. The regime is not going to fall because American heavy armor rolls into the presidential palace. It will collapse from within because it can no longer afford to buy bullets. It can no longer command the loyalty of its starving and desperate enforcers, and its critical air defense networks have been completely abandoned by terrified radar technicians who are forced to fight their own citizens in the streets. The supreme leadership is entirely isolated, watching their decades-old empire crumble in real time. This is the ultimate execution of the economic and logistical guillotine. The regime is actively drowning, and the Allied forces are simply watching the clock run out.